For years, you've known me as AC. What you might not know is that my friends don't call me that. I invite you to peek behind the curtain of the person you've gotten to know as a podcast personality. Once you've done that, I hope you'll see the man that my friends know, the guy they call Tony. So earlier today, I had a meeting with my therapist, which is something I do each and every week. And, we cover a lot of stuff because I got a lot of things going on, things I don't always know what to do with and how to handle. And, while I think like most people, I'm really, really qualified to give good advice. Because, at the end of the day, other people's stuff is always way easier than me stuff. I think that's probably true for you guys too, right? I mean, when you're talking to your friends and you're approaching somebody who is dealing with something that's like really, really overwhelming, just a really big struggle, something that, a problem they can't see their way through. And to you, from your outside perspective, the way through it usually seems pretty obvious, and you can advise your friend. And, the fact that your own life might be in shambles at the same time doesn't really detract from like how high quality your advice is. But at the same time, I think like when you're in one of these situations, at least for me, when I find myself in these situations where, people come to me and they're looking to me to guide them through difficult things, I offer them this help. I throw them a lifeline, which I know is good stuff. They know is good stuff. But after the conversation is over, I quite often find myself struggling with a bit of, I don't know, I've heard it called imposter syndrome, right? Where it's like, I'm not the person to be giving the advice. I'm not qualified to do this. I start looking at myself and thinking, wow, there's like a fraud looking back at me from the mirror. And as untrue as this stuff is, I mean, like that voice that tells me these negative things is pretty loud, right? And so I was talking to my therapist about this, and he was like just asking me all kinds of questions, trying to drill down into, okay, what is the source of this negative voice? Where is this coming from? And I found myself digging through early childhood experiences. And, as I'm sure a lot of you already know from listening to me on other projects, and I don't know, maybe what some of you don't know is that I didn't have really the easiest childhood. That being said, I really hate to sit in present day looking back at childhood and pointing a finger of blame at my parents and thinking, hey, like I'm effed up because you made me this way. Because while that might be true, it wasn't all bad things that they brought out of me. It's like, yeah, I might have crippling anxiety because of the abuse, but like a byproduct of that anxiety is that I'm hyper vigilant now. I notice things that other people miss. It's almost become like a superpower, right? Like I wouldn't have had that characteristic to my personality. I wouldn't have had that skill, that ability without having gone through the trauma. So, I mean, if I could go back in time and alter the trajectory of my life where it wouldn't have involved that abuse component, I don't know if that's something I would go back and tinker with, because that particular component is something that I actually value. It's something that serves me very, very well in the present day. As is the case of most of the things that were done to me, there's also that component of like a thing that was done for me. Maybe the part that was done for me, that wasn't by design. It was more an accidental byproduct, but either way, there it is. There's this laundry list of things that really, really are good about me, good for me, good to me, that wouldn't have existed without somebody like really, really like effing up my childhood, right? So all of that to say this, it's like while I'm digging through early childhood, trying to figure out where this whole thing comes from, this thing that motivates this negative voice that I've got in my head, I find myself really struggling because whereas my logical brain tells me, look, this is dad's fault. This 100% is dad's fault. He's the one who installed this insecurity in you. He's the guy, he should have been protecting you. He should have been building you up. He should have been encouraging you to accomplish great things, but instead he taught you that you were broken, flawed, like just such a horrible mess that you needed divine intervention. When you did normal child things, he beat you for it. When you wanted to try new things, he dismissed them as stupid. You know, like that's the sort of thing that sticks. And at the same time, it's just like, I do not want to point the finger of blame at this man for these things. And well, my counselor just sat there patiently listening to me work through this train of thought. A new train of thought started to emerge. And that one was that I'm not sure how good I'm going to be at moving forward until I can figure out how to acknowledge that wrong was done to me. Never mind, you know, the every cloud has a silver lining. I think I'm very, very comfortable with that idea. But the idea that I struggle with is the idea that every silver lining has a dark cloud. Because I was taught from early childhood that you don't look at the dark cloud. Looking at the dark cloud, that's like slapping God in the face. He's the one that gave you this life. He's the one that gave you these wonderful experiences. He's the one that gave you a roof over your head and food in your tummy and a bed to sleep in and all this stuff. What was never afforded me was the opportunity to say, quite honestly, and not with a negative attitude either, this situation sucks. To say, no, I don't like this. No, I don't want to be friends with that person. No, I don't want to eat that food. You know, there's just so many things I wasn't allowed to say no to. And I realized that like that ties right into boundaries, right? And whereas I'm really, really good at helping people understand how to establish and communicate and assert and maintain boundaries, that's something I kind of struggle with myself. I can say no to like little things, but the big things, like I feel like I owe it to people to be there for them when they need me. And I was kind of surprised when, you know, the therapist interjected and he says, you know, like, I think we're covering some good territory here, but we're coming towards the end of our session. And I want to give you a little bit of homework if that's okay. And I'm thinking, well, of course that's okay. Because, I mean, one of the things about me is that whether or not I always have a clear idea of the path forward, the one thing that I pride myself on is that I am a relentless self-improver. So even if I hadn't gotten any homework assigned to me, I would have assigned myself some sort of homework just based on the nature of the conversation. Because that's just who I am. I don't want to waste my time in therapy. I don't want to waste the therapist's time. I do want to get better. You know, and it's not like I necessarily see myself every moment of every day as somehow less than, but I know that no matter how much I become today, I could be more tomorrow. This is what keeps pushing me forward, is not a sense of self-loathing or desperate need to get away from this horrible monster that I am. It's just a case of like, look, I actually do like myself today. I think I'm a good person. I think I do good things. I think that I show up for people when they need me. But I also think that in order for me to be happy with myself, I need to keep on pushing forward. There has to be progress. Otherwise, I'm just like, if I'm not moving forward, it's not like the lack of moving forward makes me feel like I'm sitting still. I honestly feel that if I stop moving forward, then I actively am sliding backwards, which is not something that I want to do. But, all of that being said, when the therapist gave me a little bit of homework, that did make it a little bit easier for me, because I thought, okay, well, at least this is a jumping off point. And when I wrote down what the homework was, right on the surface, I thought, okay, well, this is doable. I'm a person who can communicate. I can speak, I can write, I'm introspective, I know how to get in touch with my feelings, all these kinds of things. So it seemed like this bit of homework was going to be a cakewalk. But the more I stare at the couple of things I wrote down, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this homework done before my next session a week from today. And I kind of suspect that the therapist had an idea of what he was doing, even though I didn't realize in the time. He must have known he was giving me a tall order. And the reason I thought it was easy is because he said, I just need you to write a letter to yourself. I've written letters to myself before. Back on when I was doing the Turn Up the AC podcast, I had shared a letter that I'd written to my younger self, an episode called Dear AC. And there was a lot of good stuff that came out of that. But at the same time, it wasn't a terribly difficult letter to write, because, as a person who has such deep trauma from the past, I'm not ever super detached from that young child who was being traumatized. I feel like that kid is always in the room with me, no matter where I go. So to communicate with that child, I could have just as easily turned in my head 90 degrees to the right and said, hey, younger me, I got some things to say. And it would have been just talking to somebody who I'm very, very well acquainted with. But this letter that was prescribed to me this week, God, I don't even know where to start with it. Because what he told me to do was to write myself a letter of self-compassion and self-forgiveness. I don't really know what to do with that. Because, forgiveness isn't something I struggle with when it's external. I've been trained from early childhood how to forgive. I've learned in adulthood how to forgive in healthy ways, right? To make sure that an issue is resolved and that my side of things is communicated before I forgive, instead of just blindly forgiving today so that I can resent deeply later. I think I've got a really, really good handle of forgiving other people, to forgive situations, to understand that, I don't think that anybody wakes up in the morning and sets out to hurt me. I think that when it appears like that on the surface, ultimately those actions, those attitudes are coming from somewhere. They're coming from a place of hurt, a place of pain, a place of mental struggle, whatever. I've said before that I don't believe that pain is inflicted nearly as often as it is shared. It's kind of like when you're filling up a glass with water, that glass being the person, the water being the pain. If you keep on pouring beyond their capacity to handle it, that water is going to spill out over everything all around it. And I think when people start lashing out, that's typically where it's coming from. So I can forgive them because I understand. I get like that sometimes too. When I'm too hurt, I'm too sad, I'm just too something. It's not like I necessarily lash out, but the people around me certainly are affected by whatever's going on with me, whatever things I can't process, whatever I can't handle. It does fall into their lap to some degree. And so I struggle to find myself in a place of judgment with that. It's just always a place of understanding. And when you start with a place of understanding, coming to a place of forgiveness is really, really easy. Again, I think that ties into the compassion. When I'm dealing with exercising compassion externally, it's very, very easy for me for all of the same reasons most of the time. But when I'm looking at myself, I struggle with the compassion component. I struggle with it a lot. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I don't like pointing the finger of blame. I like to try to take responsibility for myself as often as I possibly can. You know, I don't like to say, well, I am this way because of the dysfunction of childhood. I think, well, you know, it's not fair that I was made this way, but here I am. And the people who are responsible for getting me to this place, they're no longer available for comment. They're no longer in a position to put things right. And much in the same way as, you know, if somebody gets drunk and they get behind the wheel of a car and they run somebody over and there's injury or worse that comes as a result. Yes, that drunken state may have inhibited the person's ability to operate the vehicle. They may have been unaware even of what was happening. But when they sober up, they're still responsible for what happened. And I think when it comes to myself and the way I've been traumatized, I look at myself the same way. It's like, yeah, I might have been unaware in the moment of the tone of my voice, of the volume of my voice. I might have been unaware. I might have not intended things to play out the way they played out, but still they played out that way. And I still have to answer for it. And because I can't find the compassion for myself, I don't know how to find the forgiveness for myself, because it's almost like when I look at all the things that I struggle with, instead of being compassionate and thinking, man, guy, you've overcome a lot of things. Like you've come a long way considering the rough start you had in life. It's almost like I resent myself for being too weak to figure it out. So I don't know. I think I'm sure at some point this week, I'm going to figure out how to write this letter. I'm going to figure out what to put into it. But right now, I just got a big fat question mark hanging over my head. And maybe that's the whole point of this homework, to get me in this frame of mind where I'm questioning, where I'm wondering, where I'm comparing how I treat the world around me versus the way I treat myself, maybe trying to figure out how to bridge the gap between the two. Treat myself with the same consideration and compassion that I would treat a complete stranger. I don't know. But for right now, I'm stuck feeling very, very uncertain. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't want to do this homework. I just want it to be behind me. I want everything to make sense. But we don't always get to choose when things make sense. We don't always get to navigate emotions on our own terms, no matter how disciplined we are. I think sometimes there's meaning in the struggle. And these difficult places, they lead us to other places that offer good things. They offer good experiences. They offer new insights. They offer new skills, new abilities. And while I don't know how I'm going to get to that better tomorrow, past experience has taught me that I will get there. It's just right now, I can't see through the dark of it all. Anyways, I guess that's all I got for you today. If you've got thoughts on this or anything else I've spoken about either on this show or any other, feel free to send me an email. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your insights. I mean, if you've gone through something similar, if you have questions, just any of these things, just shoot me an email. Call me TonyPod@yahoo.com. And yeah, I guess I will talk to you next week.